Indie games has been kind of recognized as a movement, recently, which is pretty cool. Because back in the old days, that's all they were indie games. And now the game industry has gotten so big that we have a lot of different genres, we have a lot of different segments, and it's cool to recognize that indie games are the segment of games where people are not getting paid, but they're hoping to experiment and make some really interesting gameplay innovations that they hopefully can move into commercial titles. Indie games right now is there's a lot of really great innovation, people taking advantage of the various hardware that we have nowadays, which is a lot more than what we used to have. Even though we've settled on just a few platforms, there's a lot of different ways of inputting movement or gestures into a system. Because there's so many more people actually playing games, there's more people making games, and those new people have a lot of different ideas than the people who have been in the industry for a long time. So it's great to see the really cool new ideas coming in. And people in the commercial part of the industry, they pay attention to the indie stuff and see some of the interesting new ways of just doing lots of little things, sometimes big things, just games that are just crazy concepts or just work off of sound or whatever. It's really neat to basically just see the variety that's out there in indie. I think that some of the in the giant mainstream games, you have to kind of look at the genres that are out there, and you try and innovate and push some of the edges if you can. And when you're pushing the edges of a genre in mainstream commercial, it's cool to see what things have been done in all of these indie games and see if it applies to what you're trying to do. And if you can maybe take a mechanic or you can take an idea from an indie title that could have been just solely based on this one thing, this one mechanic or this one idea, and maybe incorporate it into your mainstream title as a way of kind of pushing the gameplay forward. And maybe, if you do that, and that's kind of seen as an incremental innovation or an incremental improvement in the genre, then you hope that people following you will kind of adapt, take it up and use it in their game, and you kind of basically everybody's an influence on everybody else. So being influenced by the indie stuff I see that as a really great place for innovation. I'm hoping that indie games in the future basically start taking advantage of other platforms that have come before the current platforms, because I really like the fact that Ian Bogost did a 2600 title, and there are a lot of other platforms out there, TurboGrafx, Atari 800s, there's a ton of stuff out there, and I think that they're just equally as valid as to basically put something on, take the latest in game design innovation and put it on an older system. And I think it would be an interesting thing to see. Even though everybody can't consume it, not everybody's consuming indie games right now. It's like a small amount of people discovering them. And so I think putting it on an older system like a TurboGrafx or an NES or whatever is a really interesting way of just showing people, hey, these systems are still valid. They can still do the cool latest game design. They just look a little different.